This is the Fujifilm X-S20, and to be frank, it didn't have to be this good. Fujifilm could have just cut a bunch of features, released this camera, and it still would have been a competitive creative tool in the market in 2023, but thankfully they didn't. In fact, the X-S20 has a rich collection of features that don't really feel throttled in any way, that makes you feel like this camera can be whatever you want it to be. I spend a lot of time on this channel talking about gear, especially brand new gear, but if you're like me and gear is just a small part of your photography journey and you really love photography, join my photo club right now. It's free to join, the link is down in the description, and this is where I share my photography adventures from around the world every other week in an easy to read way. So if you love photography, check out my Church Street Photography Club. I think you'll love it if you love photography. Now, back to this camera. This is something that caught me off guard. It surprised me a little bit because here I was expecting this sort of entry-level, friendly camera, right? Something that was easy to use, that was really geared toward the content creator. But this is something that punches well above its weight class. This is something that packs in a lot of pro features as well. And what it means for people is that you have an affordable way to get into the Fujifilm ecosystem and a healthy amount of headroom as you get better at your craft. The X-S20 packs the 4th generation 26 megapixel X-Trans sensor, a tried and tested sensor. But they take this sensor and pair it to their 5th generation processor to really unlock its potential. This sensor was already fantastic, right? We've seen it in previous cameras and it produces beautiful images, especially when you're using any one of the 19 film simulations. But when you pair it to the new processor, you actually now have the best autofocus that Fujifilm has to offer. You now have the best autofocus that Fujifilm has to offer. Yes, the autofocus of this camera is currently better than what you see in the Fujifilm X-T5. On top of this, you can capture images as fast as 20 frames per second with no crop and shoot up to 6.2K open gate, which means that you can get the entire readout of the sensor, a 3:2 aspect ratio in 6:2K, which is valuable, especially if you're doing a lot of vertical content and don't want to, keep doing a lot of this. Although this might just be good forearm exercise. We're not gonna do a tangent on forearm exercises. No. Okay, let's move on with this video. Back to autofocus, I saw the same sort of benefits where in low light situations, low contrast situations, it was like that X-T5, where it was reliably capturing focus and tracking subjects, especially if you have a modern lens. Speaking of modern lenses, I will talk about this new 8mm lens they just announced, but more on that later. The body of this camera, it doesn't have that retro styling that Fujifilm is probably most known for, but it is something that is deceptively comfortable. This is something that, while under 500 grams, also has a really deep grip. So even without a wrist strap, something that feels secure when you're using it in the field. When you look at the top, there are these customizable dials that you can use for your photography. There's a front command dial that doesn't push in, so there's no added functionality there. But there are a ton of buttons on the back of this camera, right, that you can use and customize as needed. And of course, a dedicated record button right on the front if you quickly just want to capture video in the moment. Overall, it's a camera that, especially when you pair it with one of Fuji's smaller prime lenses, is something that feels like you can carry around all day. It's something that you often want to just pick up and use because of how small, light, and approachable it is. And this, as I've talked about before, is a feature. It's one of the benefits that Fuji offers for the market. Looking more at the layout of the camera, on the back you do have a joystick instead of a disc pad. On the top you have a mode dial, and here you have your standard PSAM modes that you can choose from, as well as 4 custom modes. There's also the video that you can select and an auto mode. But now you have a vlog mode, and this just makes the camera a little bit smarter when it comes to tracking subjects, so that if you are using this to record YouTube videos, it might make your job a little bit easier. There's still a filter button, and look, I'm gonna keep pointing this out. You gotta get rid of this thing, okay? Get rid of the filter mode. Nobody's using this. If you're the one person that's using the filter mode right now, and you're the reason why they still include it on cameras in 2023, please let me know so we can point you out and shame you. Back on subject, I think that having a 5th custom mode would have provided more value for users than having a filter mode. But look, it's a tiny thing to be concerned about at a camera at this price. The XS20 also has a built-in flash, which, you know, look, some people are gonna knock it. Probably most people won't even use it. It's something that if you know how to use and bounce light, you can use for a ton of creative options. It's something that I'm glad they still include. The camera also has a number of connecting ports such as USB-C, micro HDMI, microphone jack, and a headphone jack, which is quite a bit. So you can connect any one of your accessories, use this as a webcam, use it for tethered photography, use the USB-C to charge from a power bank. There's just a lot you can do with this camera. And as you would have guessed, it's only a single SD card slot, and it does use the new Fujifilm battery, which at this point is not really new. It was ushered in with the Fujifilm X-T4, but it is that thicker, you know, rounder battery that's being used in this camera for decent battery life. I found that it can get you through 3 to 4 hours of mixed use, right? If you're moving between photo and video, which is still quite a bit. I think that most people will get more usage out of it than me just because of how heavy we were pushing this thing. But again, for a camera like this, it's something that's gonna impress more people than not. Of course, the LCD on the back of this camera turns all the way around, and it has the connecting port for the cooling fan that was introduced with the Fujifilm X-H2S. So if you open this little flap up right here, you can add the cooling fan to this camera to just get a little bit more recording time out of this. In my time with this camera, I didn't hit any thermal ceiling, but I imagine if you're in really warm environments and you're recording really long clips at the highest bit rate possible, there might be a situation where this thing overheats. But getting that cooling fan, having access to it for a camera like this, you know, it is something that's a nice to have, even though it might not be a need to have. The camera also has Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, but what's more exciting is that Fujifilm has announced that there is a brand new app coming to support their Fujifilm cameras. Starting with this and then opening up to other cameras in their lineup, you're gonna see a brand new app that will, from what they've told me, connect more reliably, be able to transfer faster, be able to geotag, be able to back up and save your settings and your profiles. I'm excited, okay? If you've been watching this channel since, well, it's almost 5 years at this point. I think I've brought this up in every Fujifilm video I can. Okay, that's an exaggeration. Maybe 80% of them, about how the app was just a poor experience. The fact that they've taken the time to develop something and usher something new, I gotta give them a tip of the hat to that. Let's wait and see how it actually performs, but I'm just happy that this is a priority and users can expect to see some improvements here. All right, that's enough about the design and the ports of this camera. Let's talk about what it can do. The Fujifilm X-S20 has 5-axis image stabilization, which gives you about 7 stops of stabilization in the field, depending on what lens you have. In my time with the camera, I felt like I can go down to half a second and still get reliable footage. My ultimate test was giving this to my 7-year-old to record some B-roll of me, and it was nice to see that this active stabilization did a pretty good job to combat his shaky hands. So this is something that people that are in the market for a camera like this will really appreciate and take advantage of. This sensor, I spent a lot of time with this sensor, not just on this camera, but on previous Fujifilm cameras, and the images are just great, especially when you take the time to create your own custom profiles and leverage any one of those 19 film simulations and tweak the settings. You can just get these beautiful results in the moment and just have something that makes you want to photograph more. This is a large reason why that Fujifilm is such a great solution for all kinds of photographers. What also makes this camera compelling, even though the menu system can be intimidating to some new users, is that you can really dive in and customize the autofocus for what you're capturing. So whether it is the eye, face, head, body, vehicle, animal detection, you can go even a step further and customize how fast and how accurate it responds to changes in autofocus. And that just means that as you develop your photography and you really tune in what you're actually capturing, you can have something that does a lot of the heavy lifting for you and uses autofocus best to what you're capturing. When it comes to video, holy shit, this thing caught me off guard because the ability for a camera like this to record the entire sensor 6.2K in a 3:2 aspect ratio in either f-log or f-log2, this makes it very close to what the Fujifilm X-H2S does in a much smaller form factor at a much more affordable price. And this just means that, well, for the target demographic for this camera, you can capture video and have more latitude to your composition when you're editing. And especially if you're doing a lot of vertical video, well, now you have more vertical real estate in this format without having to mount your camera vertically. So all in all, it just makes the video capture experience easier. The 6.2K caps out at 30p, and when you go to 4K, you can go up to 60p in a 10-bit 422 format, and this is something that I imagine most people will be using, especially if you're not doing a lot of vertical video. It's oversampled and it can be done in f-log or f-log2, so you just have a ton of detail and color information and dynamic range to use with video, and for a camera like this, that is seriously impressive. When it comes to slow motion, you can go up to 240 frames per second in 1080p. It's not the greatest of quality. You gotta feed it more light, but if you can nail your focus, nail the lighting, this is something that you can use really, really well. I will also say, this camera has the option for RAW recording through an external monitor, whether it's ProRes RAW or Blackmagic RAW. Kind of crazy to imagine. A camera like this, it unlocks the potential for RAW recording. So even if you want to have something that is like a C or B cam to your primary Fujifilm, it's cool to see that there's now another option that can take advantage of these heavy duty formats. Oh, and another small thing, for those of you that do a lot of live streaming, this is one of the few cameras that supports 4K 60p streaming. So that's something to consider if you are in the market for something like that. When you take into account all the photography features and all the video features, this is just such a power-packed creative tool. Do I think this is something for professionals? No. But for those people that are looking to get serious with their photography, those people that are looking to get serious with their hobby, with content creation, with live streaming, this is one of those cameras that you have to consider, right? And maybe you are a professional and you're looking for something that can be more of an easier to use camera, maybe your day-to-day camera, or even a B, C, or D camera to your existing solution. This Fujifilm X-S20 makes a compelling offer. It really depends on, what ecosystem you find yourself in, but there's so much happening here that it can appeal to a wide range of people. And let's not forget, with Fujifilm, you have access to a huge collection of X-mount lenses, including a new one right here. This is the new 8mm f3.5. Yes, 8mm lens for Fujifilm. When you look through the camera, it gives you an equivalent perspective of 12mm, which is just crazy wide. And you might immediately think, oh, I don't need that lens, and you're probably right. This is something that's really gonna cater toward travel and architecture, but what I will say is that when I was testing this for video, it is an interesting creative option to have. Look, if you don't want to spend a ton of money on a premium wide angle lens, on something that you're gonna use sparingly for more creative shots, you now have an aggressive option with this 8mm lens. For video, you can just get this interesting perspective, especially when you push in and pull out. It's something that feels really enveloping, right? Depending on how you use it. The autofocus of this 8mm is really quick, right? And especially with the modern Fujifilm solution, it's gonna be quick to focus, accurate, and relatively silent. Again, this is not something that I think is for most people, but when you look at the images, and especially in the weeks and months to come, when you see what people start creating with this lens, I think it's gonna have more people excited. This lens is also really compact, right? And it doesn't shift the center of gravity too far forward, especially on a camera like this. The filter size is 62mm, so it's not crazy big there either. You can find a nice filter for this and still have it be a compact solution. It's also a weather-resistant lens, so you can use it in all kinds of conditions and use it with confidence. When it comes to the glass, look, it's not the latest and greatest optics from Fujifilm, but it's still really good. And I think most people are gonna have a hard time finding issues for the photography or video that they're doing. The F3.5 might be an issue for some people, right? And look, that's fair if you are capturing a lot of low light work as well. But for a lot of people, when you are in bright conditions, if you do have a good amount of available light to you, or if you're working with studio lights, this is something that I think you should test out. I think you should find a way if you can at least get a loaner or a rental or a place that has a generous return policy and try it out just because of how unique the perspective is. This is not something that if I saw online that I would immediately think, oh, I need to get this lens. But having tested it, I now think, oh, what could I use this lens for? Or, what can I plan around this perspective? And that's something that I think Fuji users should be excited about. If you don't need the resolution of a Fujifilm X-T5 and you don't need the niche frame rates and features of the Fujifilm X-H2S, I think the X-S20 is now the default option that people should consider, at least the first option that prospective Fujifilm users should consider if they're looking for a new creative tool. This camera does so much, and it does it in such a small footprint that it makes you want to use it more, and it also gives you a ton more headroom for you to develop your photography or your videography. I often found myself just surprised by how much this camera can do. And in the past, there used to be these wider gaps between different products, right? In terms of what they can do. And in the past, it just made sense to us. Like, oh, that costs that much and it does everything, and this costs this much and it doesn't do half as much. But now that gap is so narrow and it's so specific. And you know what? That's just a great thing for consumers. While this might not be the flagship solution on the Fujifilm product page, I think it's probably the most considered one. I think this is the one that you should start looking at first for your work, and then look at, is there something else that's ultimately gonna bring you more value for your creative journey? And look, some of you might write off this camera immediately because it doesn't have the retro styling, it's not an X100V or an X Pro 3, but I think the great thing about being a creative right now is that we have cameras like this that are feature rich, coming to market at aggressive price points, so we just ultimately have more choice and more options for our creative journey. The Fujifilm X-S20 is a camera that feels like it can be whatever you want it to be. The ceiling is extremely high, where most of the limitations are going to come down to creativity. To put simply, it never felt like an entry-level camera in my use. I feel like this is really going to be a camera that will appeal to people that are looking to get into mirrorless for the first time, graduate from their mobile phone, upgrade their old DSLR, or just find something more modern for their day-to-day that doesn't feel so obtrusive. And if you've just come down to the fact that, I want something a little bit more reasonable, both in size and functionality and price for what you're capturing, I think you have to take a hard look at the Fuji X-S20. If you've made it this far in the video, first of all, thank you so much. It really means a lot that there's a good contingent of you watching all the way through to the end of the video. And look, as some of you might know, I don't personally shoot on Fujifilm anymore, but they still make great cameras. And I still believe that they're one of the most competitive places to hone your photography and now your videography as well. So as long as they're making great tools like this one here, I'm gonna make an effort to try to cover them in some capacity. And I'd love to just share my journey through these new cameras that they're offering. In any case, I'd love to hear what you guys think and what else you wanna see from this channel. There's a ton of stuff I have planned for the remainder of the year, but I'm always curious to hear what those of you that are making it to the end, what you wanna see more of. So let me know in the comments down below. Anyway, that's enough for one video. As always, my name's Gajan. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.